This show and all the content on All About Beer is able to come to you each week, thanks to the companies that support our journalism through advertising. If your company is thinking about 2023 media plans, we have options for every budget. Email info@allaboutbeer.com to learn more. And thanks for the support in keeping us on air and online. Welcome to Drink Beer, Think Beer, the podcast that gets to the bottom of every pint. I'm John Hall, and my guest this week is Jonathan Moxey of the Rockwell Beer Company in Missouri. We're going to be talking about home brewing before going pro, getting out of a monochromatic rut, and drinking at parties. And we're going to get into it all in just a moment. But first, All About Beer is back online and producing original content for beer enthusiasts and professionals. Go visit allaboutbeer.com to see the latest. And if you want to support us in that endeavor, we've set up a Patreon for both readers and professional companies in the beer space. Check out patreon.com/allaboutbeer to learn more. For additional audio content, go search All About Beer on your podcast platform of choice and listen to the shows that are now available, including the All About Beer podcast, Beer Travelers, and Brewer to Brewer. And if you're a fan of smoked beer, and well, obviously you are, why not check out This Week in Rauch Beer? The Facebook group is easy to search, and on Twitter and Instagram, it's at TW Rauch Beer. We're able to bring you this show each week thanks to the companies that support independent journalism in the beer space. You can learn more about our surprisingly affordable rates by emailing info@allaboutbeer.com. Speaking of that, this episode is brought to you by Pro Brewer. We're bringing original articles to probrewer.com twice a week, covering issues that are important to the beer industry and aimed at helping breweries of all sizes understand the different facets of the business. Check out our articles on probrewer.com every Tuesday and Thursday, and visit the site daily for other original content and to stay connected with the beer industry. I've known Jonathan Moxey since long before I was on the beer writing beat. We were in a group of beer enthusiasts that met in and around New York City at least 15 years ago. Moxey was a home brewer at the time, but he was actually more than that, of course. But first, I knew him as a home brewer, and a damn good one at that. There'd be parties and gatherings, and bombers would be passed around, and all of us youngins would talk about how beer could save the world, or at least make our worlds better. Strangely enough, a lot of folks in that group have gone on to work in and around beer, including opening their own breweries. Moxey and his wife left New York for Missouri, where he got a job at Schlafly and then Perennial, and now he's at Rockwell Beer Company as the head brewer. He's making tasty beer with soul, and it's always a pleasure to drink what he's made. He's also an insightful and a thoughtful guy, and I saw him in person at the Great American Beer Festival earlier this fall. And over leaders at Bierstadt, he got me thinking about beer in ways that I hadn't in a long time. So Moxey's here this week to share some of those thoughts and to keep the interest in beer flowing. Here's our conversation. Do you remember your first homebrew recipe? Like not one that came from a kit, but like one that you developed and saw from conception to sipping it out of a glass.
I think the first one that I ever brewed that was my own recipe was my electric blanket saison that I brewed and ended up taking to I can't remember the name of the there was a homebrew competition in New York. And I took it there, and we actually won People's Choice that year. But I fermented this in the corner of our 725 square foot apartment in Harlem, and I wanted to take I'd been reading Phil Markowski's Farmhouse Ale book, and I wanted to keep the temperature ramped up at what I thought Saison DuPont levels were at that point to help it make sure that it finished out. And so I wrapped it in an electric blanket. And we actually ended up calling it, I said electric blanket Saison, but a friend came over and she misheard me. And it was electric blanket stays on.
Stays on. Well, also accurate.
I was like, well, that's even better. So yeah, that was the first that was the first like homebrew recipe that I wrote myself that like wasn't from a kit. Um, and I moved to that pretty quickly because, like with the goal of trying to, make this a thing, make a run at it. Like I didn't necessarily want to be doing like the, kind of the Betty Crocker uh, cake mix of beer where you're following the directions of somebody else's kit and then not really expressing yourself, and there was good and ill with that. I definitely there's definitely something to following established recipes as you're working out the kinks in the early days and even now.
Yeah. What was it though to get to that point that quickly? What was the driving force inside of you to break out of that mold?
Well, for me, like I moved to New York and I'd gone to journalism school, and I realized very quickly that I didn't have the fire in my belly to get up every day and be a good journalist. And Lord knows there's enough shitty journalists out there. They didn't need
Amen. Yeah.
one. They didn't need one
I
more.
feel attacked, but that's fine.
No. Yeah.
Fine.
Not at all.
I'm fine. I'm just tired. Yeah.
But, so then it was like trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And my friend Matt had come over to a house party, and he handed me a bottle of beer without a label on it. And he's like, I used to homebrew in college. I dug my stuff out of a storage container, and if you want to split the cost of ingredients, we can. I'll teach you how to do it. And I was like, sure. And like we did it, and I mean, we did almost everything wrong. Looking back on it now, but it came out with a serviceable beer, and it was just kind of like this light went off. Like as I was looking to figure out, like, all right, how do I get out of a cubicle? What do I want to do with my life? Like I made beer, and like it really appealed to, one, I love beer, sure, but also just like the idea that I could, kind of like make a career out of coming up with an idea and then seeing it through to a physical product, and not only a physical product, but like something that, brings people a happiness, that's a social companion. Was very appealing to me. So like I did this, and I was like, all right, like now I have direction. I have, like I felt motivation, which was something that was otherwise lacking in my professional day to day.
Yeah. Somebody's asked me, people have asked me about this in the past. But like the core, like, why me as a journalist do I enjoy covering the beer industry? And I always like saying it's because it's not just about the final result in the glass, but there's so many different threads to pull. It can be, architecture, it can be agriculture, it can be art. I'm just naming all of the A's apparently now at this point, but
alliteration.
Alliteration. there's all of these various things that that beer touches on, and that's what I enjoy. Why I enjoy covering it. But I'm wondering now, as you're making your own beers this much further along in your career, if you're still thinking about the story that each beer tells, like if that journalism background kind of is just manifesting in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, and I think that there is definitely a storytelling to it. And I've always said, like especially with like being at Rockwell now, like the majority of our beer is sold on site at one of our two locations. Like we've got the brewery and tasting room, and then we've got a beer garden, which is just like serving beer and food in a city park. And I always tell people, I was like, we try in everything we do, we try to point people back to the brewery, because here at the brewery, the what's in your glass is complemented by the aesthetic of the room or the garden, the people, the music that we play, the food we have, like the way you feel, like it's all part of this like narrative, and like it allows us to tell a more complete story than, just like going to the grocery store. Not that I don't love people going out and buying our beer in an off-premise account, but like it's a more complete story than just going to the grocery store and picking up a 6-pack and, going home and watching Netflix or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that, with the beers, like, yeah, I want to tell a story every time, and it's not always the same motivation. Like, it can be a story of the land, of agriculture and the ingredients. And with like that, I think we've done several projects with Caleb Michalke from Sugar Creek Malt in Indiana, and he's just doing some incredible stuff, with heirloom grains and a bunch of different, like wood smoke and stuff like that. And he's making some really unique ingredients, and by incorporating those into our beer, like we're using agriculture and terroir to tell a story with that beer. Other times it may be, like the feeling that I want to have at a party, like it encapsulated at within a package of beer. Like, we just released Thoughtfully Spiced, which is our first Christmas holiday beer. And for that, like, I thought back to beers that I hadn't had in a long time, like Great Lakes Christmas Ale or Trogue's Mad Elf. It's something like that. And like how like drinking those beers really makes me think about like what it's like being at a party, at Christmas with friends and family members. It's a little bit stronger. You're getting.
Well, I've partied with you, so that tracks.
You're getting everybody's getting the rosy cheeks, and so we did. We lagered a like an amber bière de garde in our foeder, and then whenever we took it out, like we put just a very small, thoughtful amount of like holiday baking spices in there to kind of round it out.
That's fun. And it turned out the way you wanted it to.
Yeah. I mean, like it feels cheery. It feels warm. Like it's something that so far it's been out about a week, and the response has been strong for it. Like the label looks like an ugly Christmas sweater, and so it's just it's fun, especially as we've got people coming in here looking to shop for the holidays and stuff, get something other than just a gift card.
So I jumped ahead in the narrative by asking about journalism, but I'm wondering about, so you're at this party, you get into homebrewing, you excel pretty fast, and then in 2012, you leave your other careers behind and you go into professional beer making. And I think about 2012 a lot, actually, because I think that was a important year when we look back. 2010, 2011, 2012 are going to be important years when we look back in where craft in America was and is now, because we were coming out of a recession. And a lot of folks were looking for a change. Folks had been laid off. Folks, were in bad straits and were saying, okay, like, I don't want to live this way. I want to chase my dreams. I want to hang my own shingle. I want to sort of do my own thing. I don't know how much that played a role for you at the time, if any, but I feel like those years, there's a lot of energy that was around getting into beer at that time. Does that track? Does that seem fair?
Absolutely. I mean, like my wife Lauren and I, like we knew, like we were living in New York at the time, and we knew that was always going to be a limited engagement for us. Like we wanted to raise our family closer to the relatives, and knowing what a brewer makes if we were going to be in New York City, we want to live in New York City and like raising a family and
725 square feet. Yeah.
right. Was not, would not be very sustainable.
Right.
Yeah. And
it's a tough sell to the in-laws. Yeah.
Yeah. And, like I think back to where we're at, like where we were at then, there were a lot of people in New York that were kind of in the same way that I was at the time. Like they wanted the same thing, and it wasn't quite there yet. Like they didn't have the Farm Brewers Bill
right.
that allowed people to sell beer by the glass. But the number of people in the New York City Homebrewers Guild at that time that went on to brew professionally or start their own brewery, like, was absolutely staggering.
Yeah.
Like just about every New York City brewery that's there now, like, can find roots from, if not their founder, at least several employees from there at that time. And it also came to together for me personally, because we were trying to figure out, like, where do we go next? Like, if we're not going to brew beer here in New York City, like, do I go to brewing school, or do I move to somewhere that's more established, like, Portland or Denver or San Diego, and try to get a job there where there's like a critical mass of breweries.
Right.
And in St. Louis, we have like what we would call the class of 2011, where it's Perennial and Four Hands and Urban Chestnut and Civil Life, and then Second Shift opened actually the year before that. But all of a sudden, like, there was more than just Schlafly and a brew pub or two here. Like, there was like another wave of craft breweries that really kind of kicked things off in St. Louis. And I was like, oh man, like, this is, like, I can actually move back to Missouri, and we can raise our kids within half an hour of their grandparents.
Yeah.
And really make a go of it. It was very attractive. And so, yeah, like that all kind of like came together right as we were preparing to move. And, like it made a focal point on the road ahead. like of where the hell am I going? What I do, like, I want to brew beer, but how do I get there?
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because I wasn't in the New York homebrew community, but there were groups that you and I were part of enthusiast groups and drinking groups and things like that, and there were so many folks that went on in those groups to do something professional in or around the beer space, because I think that there was interest in it. But was so interesting, and I've caught shit for this in the past, but 10 years ago, as you look back to like 2012 or 15 years ago, New York was a lousy beer town, and
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, but I've caught shit from people who have been around for a long time saying, well, it's better than it was, and it's like, that's great, but go to Chicago, go to Denver, go to cities that New York likes to look down its nose at for everything else, and they're going to run circles around us beer wise. So it's interesting to look back now to see who's opened, and to also see who made their bones in New York, or who started the groundwork and then took that to other parts of the country. It's just, it's interesting. And I'm curious to see, as people are talking about a recession now, and whether or not that comes to fruition, who knows? I'm sure somebody will know, but I'm a journalist, not an economist. But I feel like after you get out of one of those, people start to, or while you're in it, and then when you get out, people start to think about, okay, am I happy? Am I going to try to do something else? Like, what's going to be my next step? And we will likely see more people enter into the space after the next downturn, whenever that may be. And I'm wondering, because you got in at that point when there was that excitement around it, how has that shaped your career over the last 10 years? Like getting in those years, going pro in those years where, there really was that entrepreneurial spirit, or that, I'm going to, follow my dream. I'm going to, being around people who are doing the exact same thing as you at the same time.
Yeah,
Does that make sense? Think, is that a reach?
Yeah, it does. No, like I think about like where I was before, I was in I had a very good paying job, like I was making more money then than I not counting the cost of living, but like making more money then than I am now 10 years later.
Yeah.
But also,
you had one of those jobs that a lot of people didn't like you for, but yeah,
I stumbled up, I did. It was by no grand plan of my own. I just, my last semester of my second senior year of journalism school, I had to have one elective and to complete my degree, and it was business journalism. Yeah. And Marty Steffens, my professor there, like one of the first things she said on the first day of class was like, "Hey, if you don't get anything else out of this class, I'll get you a job." And so we moved to New York, and I couldn't find a job, and I was like, "Hey, Marty," and I mean, she didn't just give me one job; she got me two, and they were great paying jobs. They weren't for me, and I worked with some really great people who I still care very much about, but like I hated going to work every day.
Yeah, and I remember talking with you about that at the time.
Yeah, and like and being there, having that, like being well paid, but in the salt mines, so to speak, like it gave me a different perspective for whenever you're starting off in brewing. And a lot of it is shit work, like you're squeegeeing floors and you're washing kegs, and you're hot, you're cold, you're sore, you're tired, and the money's not great, but you're doing something that you love. Yeah. And having that previous experience before of dreading going to work every day gave me a much greater appreciation of how good I have it. Like whenever, you're staring at an amount of cooperage that needs to be washed, and you're thinking about it, like it gives you a much better outlook on it than you might otherwise have whenever you spend so many years doing something that you hate.
And I like that you've still sort of carried that through to even where you are now. Like I feel like people can lose perspective over time.
Yeah, like I have a tremendous amount of gratitude for where I've been able to come, in my career, and for the people that have made that possible for me. The support from Lauren and the rest of my family, and the people at Schlafly and Perennial and Rockwell that have allowed this to happen. Like, I mean, it's crazy, like you're. You do a lot of droll stuff sometimes, but sometimes like you're meeting like your hero, you're brewing heroes, or you're pouring beer in a country you've never been to, and like people are running across the room to try your beer. Like that's an incredible high.
Yeah.
But like you have to be passionate about it. You have to care about like the day-to-day slog stuff, and I try to impress that on younger brewers that are like coming into these roles, because if you're not loving the mundane, the grind of it, then you should probably find somewhere else, like another industry to be in, because
Yeah.
there's a lot there are a lot better ways to make money.
Right.
Money can't be the primary motivator. I mean, like, obviously
Right.
we're in business, but like, uh, it's not a get rich and coast thing. Like, you're still doing, light manufacturing
Yeah.
every day.
Yeah. Be mindful of the money and also on what it's going to do to your back and knees.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. But I like hearing that perspective, because I think 10 years in, that's an important thing to be reminding the next generation of, because when, your generation of brewers got into it, and people were opening up their own places, there was a lot of success in the industry, and we were seeing national brands, their founders, make it onto the Forbes billionaires list, and you were seeing huge numbers by the handful of craft brewers that have been around for a while, and some were driving some really nice cars, and there was this sort of, it wasn't a get rich quick thing, but there was a well, maybe there is a pot of gold at the end of this rainbow kind of thing. And I think the last 10 years have brought reality to the larger beer community on that front.
Yeah, I think so, because like, there's only so many slots available for national and large regional breweries, and that, to me, like, I mean, if that's your goal, then more power to you. That, to me, has never been an aspiration.
Yeah.
For me, it's like creating something that is unique to the area that we're in, that's sustainable, because, like, like, we're essentially a neighborhood or a city brewery, and I want people from abroad to know about our beer, but I want that to be because somebody from, like, either they visited St. Louis or somebody from St. Louis shared it with them.
Yeah.
And I think that, focusing on that, like, really trying to establish roots and be in and of a community, is probably the best way to, in my opinion, to be a going concern in another 5, 10, 20 years.
Yeah. So what's keeping you interested these days? Where's your brewing mind bringing you as to where you want to be putting your brewing focus?
So I look, and I don't want this to sound like derogatory to any particular beer style, because
you're going to get hate mail. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, I want people to drink what thrills them, like, if you're passionate about drinking a heavily fruited quick sour, or a stout with raisins and cocoa nibs and marshmallows in it, then that's great. And there are plenty of people that do that, or make hazy IPAs, and some of them are very good. But like, you see, there's so many breweries that are like zeroed in on like 2 or 3 types of beer, and there's so many other styles out there that are classics for a reason, that deserve a spot on your tap list. And then also, like, whenever you're not focusing on that same vocal minority of beer consumers, like, people have appetites for these other things. And so what I've focused on, continue to focus on, is making good, like, straightforward beers at a high level, like, whether that is a Pilsner or a Bock or a porter, like, just making it the best we can. And then also, like, looking at these classic styles and trying to create something new through a modern lens. Like, a perfect example is we just released a hoppy brown ale. And
okay.
Yeah, because John, I want to set the world on fire, like, and be the 2010 West Coast of the Midwest in 2022. But like,
I mean, it's a good goal. Godspeed to you. Yeah.
So, but like you think about like hoppy beers that are darker and have more character. Like you're starting to see them pop back up. Like Firestone Walker is
Wookie Jack just came
bringing back Wookie Jack. Wiseacre out of Memphis. Their Strizzle beer. Like they're good friends, and I saw on Instagram, like they posted a picture of their IPA. Like they just call it an IPA, but I mean, like it is like this brilliant, like ruby brown, and it's delicious. And you drink these beers, and they don't taste like they're dark, like some of the hoppy browns or Cascadian dark ales, black IPAs, whatever you want to call them, that people were drinking 10 years ago, but they don't taste like that.
Yeah.
Like they've taken what was good about those things then and gotten rid of what wasn't. Like they're not as, they're not cloying, they're not ashy or too much caramel malt. Like everything's dialed back, but like there's still some character there that sets it apart from things other places are doing. And so, like we do that. And I think I told you this story before, but like there's this movie theater in town, and you go in, and for $13 a quart, you can get a beer. It's like going into a time machine. Like you walk in, and it's Lagunitas IPA, and it's Dogfish Head 60 Minute, and it's Bell's Amber Ale. Like, and I love all three of those beers. And normally, if you see them in a spot around town, like they may have actually been from 2010 and it tastes like it. But here, like they're blindingly fresh. And I drank this Bell's Amber Ale. I was like, holy shit! Like it was a nostalgia thing for me, but it's like, hey, this is still really good.
Yeah.
This, we need to have a less monochromatic draft list. And so we brewed an amber ale, and, like we updated it. Like it tastes like an amber ale, but it's not cloying, and it's done very, like there's an audience for it.
Yeah. And it's so cool to hear that there is an audience for it, because on the larger scale, like if you're looking at national sales data, that's not going to, aside from Bell's, like it's not going to register as anything that's making waves. But if there is excitement behind it on the level that you were talking, being a neighborhood brewery, being a, like a town or a city brewery kind of thing. I think that just leads to, a better cluster of drinkers, and it goes back to those early days of, being in that beer drinking group with you and all these other folks. And, we'd all bring bottles, like how many bombers would we be bringing to these shares of things that we picked up around the country, and we're drinking ambers or Weizenbachs or like weird things that we couldn't find elsewhere, and having our minds expanded because of that. But now having, a brewery tap list like that, where it's not just here's 15 different hazies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that, please don't anyone hear me saying that like amber ales are the future.
No.
Like if I were a national or a regional brewery in 2022, like trying to roll something like that out at that scale, like you might as well just like fuel your kettle with your by burning money
right
underneath it. It is, it's and it's an advantage and a privilege of being somewhere that is small, where it's like, yeah, like I'm going to make 15 barrels of that, and I'm going to sell it across the 2 locations and give people more variety there. And that's also one of the things that I love about, the majority of our guests aren't, beer geeks. And beer geek is probably not the right word. The type of people that are ticking things on Untapped and, standing in line for releases and stuff like that. Like those, we welcome all those people, but also there's people that just like drive by, like, hey, like I want to grab a beer after work, or I want to meet some friends here, or have an office party. Like you're not focusing solely on this like very small subset of people.
Do you feel that there is a better understanding of beer out by you because of Anheuser-Busch and supporting local breweries?
Yeah, I mean, like St. Louis is a beer drinking town. I mean, like you drive around here and the architecture, like you see dating back to the mid 1800s, like the history, it's just like ingrained. Like beer is always around, lager heavy. And I think that, AB has done a lot to ingrain that in the community. And the water here is great, thanks to them, and that's been very beneficial for the culture. But also, whenever they initially sold out to InBev, a lot of people lost their jobs, and like St. Louis, like is a very loyal town as long as you're loyal to them, and that happened at a very a very fortuitous like window in time, because that's also whenever these this class of 2011 brewers were starting up, and people were like, well, we got to drink beer from somewhere, and trust me, nobody is hurting AB's sales numbers here in St. Louis, but it did opens people's minds to things other than the almighty Bush.
Yeah. I mean, and there were some great breweries that popped up, because of that, because of people leaving AB. And Josh Noel wrote about a lot of them in his book, Barrel Aged Stout and Selling Out, which if folks haven't read that, they should.
Yeah, that's a great book.
Yeah. So as you're thinking now about your amber ale is not going to set the world on fire, but that there is interest behind it, do you think that's going to give you the ability to branch out even further, style wise?
Yeah, I mean, like we're, as we continue with our like the beer garden and doing more with food in addition to our partners, like we're partnered currently at the brewery with the Niche Food Group, who has several, really great, like James Beard Award winning restaurants around town, and they do our food and they do great. And then we've got our own thing going down at the beer garden that it's developing, like looking to do more with beer and food together, and going beyond just like your normal brew pub fare, pairing beer with food. But we're, our scale does allow us a lot of flexibility across styles. Like we're doing mixed firm beers in our fooders, and they're doing surprisingly well on draft here, which is really awesome to see people come in and appreciate a delicate, nuanced, balanced mixed firm beer that isn't going to strip the enamel off your teeth.
That's
like
important
with those beers. And whether it's a 3% Goza or a 15% Imperial Stout, like I want people to have like to want to revisit that beer. I never want to create a beer where it's like, like that's great, I'm glad I tried, but I don't need to ever have that again. And so like we're developing, trying to be thoughtful about the beers that we're developing, but broaden people's exposure to other styles that they may not find as readily available anymore.
I like that you brought up, though. I mean, I know the beer garden is a big part of, your brewery's future plans and its current successes, but also bringing up food as well. And even talking about your Christmas beer earlier, of a beer to drink at parties, to bring to parties. There's something to be said about, I don't know if you were doing this on purpose or not, but the theme of, reminding folks that beer can be a party beverage, that, it doesn't always have to be about ticking or, just, I don't quite know where I'm fully going here with this, except for the fact that, like, I haven't heard people talk about beer in terms of socialization in quite some time. And I'm sure the pandemic has a lot to do with that. But it's nice that you're thinking about it and working to remind people of its social nature.
Yeah, I mean, like, we in creating the spaces here, like we've put a lot of thought and effort into trying to create a third space, in the traditional sense, a modern beer hall, modern beer garden, like somewhere where people gather and, brewing the beer that speaks to that, that, is interesting, it's always well made, or at least that's the goal.
Right.
And it's interesting enough that it's going to keep you coming back, but it's not to the point of being distracting where, it's enhancing your situation as opposed to becoming the situation.
Yeah.
And I think back about, like, kind of like my evolution as a beer nerd and beer drinker. And whenever I started out, it was trying as many different things as I could. And a lot of that was, trying to educate myself. But, and I'm not trying to bag on Untapped as a platform, but like
no, because Greg Avolo was in that group that we were all.
Yeah, he was. Yeah,
he was a
friend. Yeah, he was a friend. And like I was keeping track of all the different beers that I was drinking, and because I wanted to be able to look back and see whether I'd tried something or not, and it became so distracting, and I realized that I never looked back to check. I remembered, like, oh yeah, I had that.
Right.
And then finally one day I was sitting at the bar at Spite and Dival, which is a notorious dead spot for cell reception. And
yeah.
I was trying to check in this beer, and I don't remember what the beer was, but it was something that you could only find at Spite and Dival at that point. And I was so frustrated because I couldn't get cell reception. I was like, this is stupid. Like, like I'm completely out of, out of the moment because I'm trying to tick this beer, and for what? And instead of just sitting there and enjoying the company that I was with and the beer that was in my glass, like I was completely taken out of the moment. And like the only thing that I've used it for since was whenever we were adding our own beers at Perennial that we were making, or it's a great way to see if somebody else has already come up with your super clever beer name.
Right.
But yeah, like I want to. And if you want to tick beers, more power to you. Like I'm not going to yuck anybody's yum.
Yeah.
But for me, it was just like, yeah, like we should pay more attention to the experience as a whole, and how beer is an accessory to the experience and not the experience itself. Whether you're getting together at your neighborhood beer hall, or if you're fortunate enough to be able to like travel somewhere like Brussels and go to Cantillon or De La Seine, and even there, like it's not just the beer. Like you're you're experiencing the people and the culture, and you're soaking up the history of the place, the smell and the way that that place makes you feel. And beer is the beer itself is part of that, but only a part.
Yeah, that's I've had a similar relationship with Untapped in the last. I wrote about it in Drink Beer, Think Beer, the book, but yeah, I think there's so much more to be seen outside of the tiny little screen in your hand, and somehow the beer just tastes better, I think, when you're present in the moment than, I don't know, trying to earn a digital badge for something. But
like I remember the first time I went into Suarez Family Brewery. Like we were driving around upstate, and we were headed up to Belgium comes to Cooperstown, and we made a pit stop there, and I walked in, and like I'd had some of Dan's beers at Beer Street in Brooklyn before, but I'd never been to the brewery. And I walk in, and it's just kind of like this gray, misty day, and John Prine's Clay Pigeons is playing on the radio, and then Dan like hands me the most pristine glass of Palatine Pills, and it was just like, it was everything. And I can't imagine like I remember what the beer tasted like, but I remember much more just like being in that space, like feeling all those other things. And yeah, it's lost whenever you're distracted by, technology, or, the self-created anxiety of like, did I get in this line early enough to secure, one of 75 bottles of whatever it is we're after today.
Yeah. Amber ale.
Yeah. Amber ale,
that's what you have to do, is you have to create a limited amount of amber ale.
I'm going to wax dip the cans, and we're going to have a line out back for all of the
hand number,
all the middle-aged men, all the middle-aged men that want to drink my hand numbered amber ale.
Socks and sandals mandatory.
That's right.
And yeah. I would love to see that. Just like the special release, 75 cans available only. Yeah. And then just dump the rest. Dump the rest of your 15 barrel batch, but just cans, 5 cans, and just the resale alone is going to be sending somebody's kid to college. So
that's right.
I'm mindful of your time, so I've been asking folks for the last while on this show the green door question, which is something that I first saw in The Good Place, the television show. So it's introduced in the last season, where you can walk through a green door and be any place at any time with whoever you want to be with. And so if we had a green door on our plane of existence, and after this conversation was over, you could walk through it and be at any pub or any brewery anywhere in the world, where would you want to go? Who would you want to be with? And what would you like to be drinking?
For me, and I do have one in the can for this, because the first time I heard you ask that question, I thought about it myself, and I've thought about it several times since, and the answer is always the same. It's this wonderful beer bar called De Bruges Biertje. My Dutch is terrible. And
unless you live there, everybody's Dutch is terrible. Yeah.
It's this little bar in Bruges, and my wife and I would be there with Lauren, and we would be drinking Girardin Black, and probably some Dedal bottles, and just sitting there and reading for hours. And we did that. We took a kind of a flight of fancy in December of 2019. We went over with some friends to see the Christmas markets in Bruges and Brussels, and we sat there for several hours that afternoon. And it was cold outside, but it was warm indoors, and there was all these people, they're bundled up in their sweaters, and they're hanging out, they're having conversations, and there's not TVs on or anything like that. I don't even remember if there was music playing, but you're drinking some of the best beer in the world in this quirky old bar off a side street in the center of Bruges. It's just about perfect.
Oh, that does sound perfect. That's nice, especially for this time of year as well. Well, thanks, pal. This has been fun having you on. It's good to talk to you this way. It's even better when I get to see you in person, like I did during GABF this year. So I hope we can do it in person. So I haven't been out to your part of the country in years. So I need to.
I mean, there's
There's
a story brewing. It's that 2023 is the year of dark hoppy beers and amber ales. So come to the hotbed of that activity.
Yeah, the All About Beer exclusive of
that's right.
Our in-depth investigation immediately followed by our going out of business sale.
I mean, you come out, we'll brew a Rausch beer and a Rausch amber.
Perfect.
And we'll sell all three of them.
To you, me, and that one guy who's always good for a can.
We'll make no money on it, but we'll sell all three of them.
Thanks again for doing this. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure, John.
Amber ales for all. What do you think? Let me know by emailing John Hall. It's JOHNHOLL at allaboutbeer.com or share on Twitter at John_Hall. All About Beer is on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Just follow along at All About Beer. And of course, This Week in Rauch Beer is also online. The Facebook group is easy to search, and on Twitter and Instagram, it's at TW Rauch Beer. We're able to bring you this show each week thanks to the companies that want to support independent journalism in the beer space. If you would like to learn more about our surprisingly affordable rates, please reach out to info@allaboutbeer.com. Speaking of that, this episode is brought to you by ProBrewer. We're bringing original articles to ProBrewer.com twice a week, covering issues important to the beer industry and aimed at helping breweries of all sizes understand different facets of the business. You can check out our articles on ProBrewer.com every Tuesday and Thursday, and make sure to visit the site daily for other original content and to stay connected with the beer industry. Don't forget, All About Beer has a podcast channel now. You can search and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. Steal This Beer has new episodes every Monday, and the BYO Nano podcast comes out on the 15th of every month. And one more time, go visit allaboutbeer.com. On this show, Nate Schweber does the music, Jeff Quinn designed the logo, and I'm John Hall. New episodes release every Wednesday, and that's when I'm going to be back again to drink beer and to think beer.